Good day and welcome back. Tonight we take a look at Frederik Pohl's Gateway. When this novel came out, it won the Nebula in 1977 and the Hugo and Locus Awards in 1978. And the novel begins with the main protagonist, a guy called Robert Stately Broadhead, sitting in front of a psychiatrist. And this is not your average Joe Blow. He's actually an artificial intelligent life form who's treating Robert because Robert has got some repressed memories and he's having a real tough time of life and he's trying to come to the bottom as to why am I feeling this way, what's going on. So the novel sort of alternates between those therapy sessions with the shrink called Siegfried von Shrink. Robert nicknamed him Siegfried, which I thought was just an absolutely fantastic name for an artificial robot. And Robert telling a first-person account of what led him to this point in his therapy. So the sort of novel alternates between those therapy sessions and a one-person account, the first-person account of the events leading up to it. And in the midst of that storylines, at the beginning of every chapter, there's all these excerpts from mission reports, personal classifieds, technical bulletins that really do wonders in building this wonderful world and technology that Heechee have left behind. And I thought Frederik Pohl did a really good job of that. So what we learn is that we're in a distant future. Earth is really overpopulated and overcrowded, and life is really, really tough on Earth. And this Robert fellow is actually a shale miner. So they're mining food. I think it's off asteroids or something. But they're mining food, and Robert was one of these shale miners. And he wins a small lottery, something like, I think it was just over $200,000. And he uses that bit of fortune to buy a one-way ticket to Gateway. And what is Gateway exactly? Well, Gateway is this asteroid that has been hollowed out by this alien race called the Heechee. And they've hollowed out this asteroid and left behind a whole lot of technology. Most important of which is like over 1,000 faster than light spaceships. So Robert has bought himself this one-way ticket because there's a whole lot of money to be made on Gateway, because what humans have learned through trial and error, and they've got absolutely no idea these spaceships work. They don't know what propulsion system they use. They don't know how it works, and they've literally, by trial and error, gotten these machines, these spaceships, which are configured in a one-person, three-person, or five-person setting, and they've been able to just punch in numbers into this dashboard, and it takes them to all parts of the galaxy. But they have absolutely no idea where they're going. They've literally got no idea how these things work, and it's purely based on potluck and random chance, and they end up in all these different places. But there's a ton of money to be made, because this Heechee technology is very prized, because humans are obviously benefiting from all this technology and the science that they're learning through these missions. And there's a huge reward for people who make significant discoveries. So Robert thinks, this is my meal ticket, right? This $200,000 that I won is not enough for me to live life comfortably. But if I make it big in Gateway, I've made it big for the rest of my life. So that's what he sets out to do. And what we learned is that once he gets to Gateway, fear starts to set in, because, like I said, these flights that these prospectors are taking, these they're not for the faint-hearted, right? So whilst he's on Gateway, he sees all these people come back, literally getting scraped out of their spaceships because they've encountered some kind of space anomaly, or they've come back burnt or dead, or the trip takes too long and they've come back starved and died. Right? It's terrible. So I can quite understand why Robert, once he got there, panic really started to set in, and he just couldn't work up the courage to go on one of these mission trips. So whilst he's on Gateway, he's made acquaintances with two different women, one of which is a lady called Kayla Moylan, I think her name was, or surname was. And what happens with Kayla is that she's been out on a previous trip and she's made a little bit of money, but she's also just terrified of going back, right? Because people coming back dead is a daily routine for these people. So she's seen a lot of this and she's just can't work up the courage. We find that Robinette has yet to go on one of these spaceships, and the two get, romantically involved, and they just feed on each other's nerves and negativity and fear. And that, that relationship is not one we would say is made in heaven, right? And it's really bad. So eventually Robinette and Kayla go out on this mission, and they're unlucky in their endeavors. So they come back, but they haven't found anything exciting, and there was no great reward to be made. And he finds himself now, Robinette, even more fearful to take yet another trip, because it's a bit like that Russian roulette, right? He's flipped the barrel once and got unlucky and thought, the odds are against me, right? They just continue to stack up against me, and then he couldn't work the courage to go on the second trip. This leads to a whole lot of tensions rising between him and Kayla, and it leads to some pretty stupid, unforgivable, really, things that Robinette does with that relationship. And he, almost to punish himself, flings himself into one of these one-seaters, almost as punishment, punches in a whole lot of things which were outside of regulation, and he gets himself into a little bit of hot water. But in doing so, he discovers a couple of things which ultimately lead him to a third and final, a third and final trip, and I'll leave it at that. So look, I thought Frederik Pohl did an absolutely wonderful job with Gateway. I absolutely loved the world building. I think Frederik Pohl did a really good job of building that world, building those artifacts, and building a real sense of mystery around the Heechee. Like I said, between every chapter, you get these excerpts, and some of which are just simple things like nursery rhymes. And one of them talked to, nursery rhymes that the children are singing, that talk to the last Heechee. And I just thought it was wonderful where he's just really built, I think, a mystery novel in the Gateway, and one that really encourages to go and read the sequels, right? I think as a standalone novel, it's just absolutely wonderful, and you can leave it at just the one novel and you'll be satisfied, like I was, hopefully. But it's also whets the appetite to read the sequels in this novel, because like I said, it's just a really wonderful piece of world building, and you want to sort of find out more about these Heechees. Who were they? Why did they leave things the way they were? It just, I thought, really, really wonderfully done. So another thing I really enjoyed in Gateway is the main protagonist. Now, you got to say, the protagonist, Robinette Stately Broadhead, is not what you'd call a hero, right? He is actually quite the opposite. He's an anti-hero. He doesn't have a whole lot of redeemable qualities. But that's what I really enjoyed about this novel, to be honest. It's I really enjoy when you have a novel that, it's still such a wonderful story through the eyes of someone who's not exactly perfect, right? He has a lot of faults. He hasn't got a whole lot of redeemable qualities. But somehow Frederik Pohl was still able to write a story around this person that is fully captivating. And I think the large appeal for me was the fact that he's a vulnerable person, right? He's a realistic individual, and not everyone can fight the courage and go out there, right, in circumstances like that. So yeah, I thought it was just really wonderfully done. So the other thing I found really wonderful in this novel is Siegfried von Schrink, right, the artificial intelligence psychiatrist. I thought it was some wonderful piece of foresight from Frederik Pohl to foresee what I believe will be a not too distant future, where we will have this artificial intelligence and machine learning holograms that are able to deal with mental health issues as well as other medical conditions, right? So I really enjoyed the foresight that Frederik Pohl had there, and honestly, I don't see that as a fantastical piece of work. I think with all the advances we've had in artificial intelligence, especially over the last couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised if my children or my children's children will one day be faced with these kind of technologies, right? So I thought it was just really, really well done. And I really liked the interactions between Siegfried and Robinette. You could really see some of the frustrations there between Rob and the psychiatrist. And I just thought the balance was really good. I really enjoyed the interactions. I can't say for sure, but it does read like Frederik Pohl has had some experience with psychiatrists, because there's a lot of Freudian sort of psychology in the novel during those sessions that I found rather interesting. Yeah, so look, very, very enjoyable book. There was a lot you can say about Frederik Pohl. I really did like those excerpts, like I said. I just thought they did a wonderful job of really building the sense of mystery and the complete world, right? It really felt like you could really see how this world shapes up, because it has things like the actual contract with the company that runs the gateway, and just all sorts of, even personal classifiers, like, people advertising art portraits, like, so someone's going to paint your portrait. And I thought just that little bit of detail, it was so refreshing, so wonderful, that every time I picked up the book to read, I didn't want to put it down. It was just a really wonderful, enjoyable read. So there's a lot to say about Frederik Pohl's Gateway, and I was really scratching my head trying to think, well, can I be thinking of some negatives, or what are the things I might not like about this? And look, and it's really hard to say. I really enjoyed the book end to end. The only thing I would say is, I wonder if I can flick and find one. But there are some of those excerpts at the beginning of each chapter are basically written in this computer readout. And it almost reads like good old, oh, here it is, perfect. Good old assembly language, right? I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's sort of like, it seems like there's a whole lot of go-to statements and lines of code with some clear text mixed within it all. And I didn't mind it. I thought it was refreshing. But it really doesn't add anything to the storyline. Where some of the other excerpts, like the mission reports and the classifieds, help with that world building, I didn't really quite get the point of these computer printout almost. They look like computer printout excerpts. Yes, I didn't quite get the meaning of that. They seem to be little extractions from the actual sessions that Rob and Siegfried had together. But yeah, I didn't think it added to the plot. It didn't progress the storyline at all. And it wasn't, at least I didn't see a cookie in there. So maybe there's a cookie in there if you're paying close enough attention, but I didn't see it. So that was the only sort of thing that, it was definitely not a negative, but it's sort of, I guess, I'm really nitpicking to find something that wasn't quite, enjoyable in the book. The other thing I would say is, I really enjoyed the character of Robinette Stetley Broadhead, right? I thought he was a complex character. I like flawed humans. Maybe it says something about my personal psyche. I'm not sure. But I like characters that are not Jason Denault, right? If you're familiar with Harry Harrison's work, where that guy could basically do no wrong, right? He just the perfect hero, can get himself out of any situation, a real world MacGyver, as far as the novel goes. And those characters for me don't really do it. I rather prefer someone like Robinette Stetley Broadhead, who's this person who's got a whole lot of problems, who can be relatable, not in his actions. I'd hate to relate to this guy, to be honest, but in that flawed humanity point of view. I really enjoy books that show the humanity of characters, and I think this is wonderfully done in that. But I'm talking about it in the dislike sections, because I can see some people being put off by that main protagonist, right? He's not a very likable person, like I said, and he doesn't have a whole lot of redeemable qualities. So keep that in mind, right? I can see why some people would not like this novel because of that particular aspect, but I absolutely loved it because of that. So look, when it comes to the memory test that I've been putting novels to, I first read this novel, I think it was around about 2005. So almost 20 years now where I first read this novel. And it stayed with me, right? The Gateway has stayed with me. But I may be a little bit biased because I really did enjoy the Heechee Saga, right? So I've read all the actual Heechee books, the sequels to this novel. So, it may be that it stood the test of time because I am familiar with the works. I've read the sequels, so it may have stuck deeper into my memory than otherwise it would have. Because the Heechees I thought just were fascinating and has never left my mind. But, interestingly enough, though, when I read it this time around, I really enjoyed the psychiatry sessions, the psychiatry. I really loved Siegfried. I thought he was just absolutely awesome. I loved the ending of the novel. But, this, I can't say that's what I remembered. So when I was reading through the novel, I can't really remember much of those therapy sessions, which is sort of interesting, just maybe the way my mind is worked. But yeah, it stood up really well to the test of time for me. So recommendations. Who would I recommend this novel to? I think if you like Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama or Larry Niven's Ringworld, there's an element of that in this novel, right? Where we have this alien artifact. There's a sense of mystery as to who left this here and why they left it here. And there's a sense of awe there, right? So I think if you've enjoyed those two novels, I think there's aspects of this book that you will really enjoy as well. I think the other recommendation I can make is, and we've reviewed it on our Sci-Fi Shed Later in the past, is Clifford Seamack's Way Station. Very similar kind of concept here, where, and it's sort of different in a sense as well, right? Because Clifford Seamack almost answered the mystery of the universe, where, you can use this way station and you're seeing all these alien beings that live throughout the universe, and it's just a wonderful, eye-opening mystery solver, right, of what life may really be like out there in the cosmos. Where this gives you that same kind of awesomeness, but builds the mystery around it, right? So sort of almost polar views of it. But I think if you like Clifford Seamack's Way Station, you're really, really going to enjoy Gateway. I think it scratches the same itch for me, and I'm sure it will for you too. So yes, very enjoyable read, Frederik Pohl's Gateway. We've got a difficult decision to make and rank it on our Sci-Fi Shed Ladder. So how about I set up and we'll do that right now. So back to the Sci-Fi Shed Ladder, where I've been ranking all these wonderful Hugo and Nebula award-winning novels. And tonight we've got yet another difficult decision, ranking this novel against all these wonderful novels on the list so far. And I've been struggling this week. I've really been thinking about it hard because I knew it wasn't going to be an easy choice. Because this book, let's just start by saying it's going to be in the top 3, right? So far. It's that good of a book. So maybe let's go through some of my reasoning and why I think that is. And maybe we'll start with Way Station. So for those of you who've been following the channel for some time, you probably know how much I love Way Station, right? It's just, for me, a wonderful piece of science fiction, and what science fiction really means, right, for me, which is alien first contact, that sense of wonder that you get as a stargazer, that little kid, if you're still that little kid at heart, who looks up to the heavens and wonders, right, what's out there. Way Station, for me, always scratched that itch. And where Gateway sort of gave you a view of what the world may look like, so it sort of solved that mystery and gave you a glimpse of what is out there when it comes to the rest of the world, the galaxy. I think Gateway is, for me, better than Way Station because it also adds that sense of mystery around it, which I really enjoyed, right? So it gives you this glimpse of what could be out there with all these wonderful technologies and all these stars and planets and space anomalies that are out there, with a sense of mystery around it. So I actually did enjoy it more than Way Station, which is saying a lot for me. And all week I've been arguing with myself, is Gateway better than Dune? Because there's a big part of me that says it is, right? That's how good of a novel I think Frederik Pohl Gateway is. And a lot of me says it deserves to be on top of this list. And I'm finding it really hard. And part of me is saying, is it because I don't want to get swept up in the success that is Dune, right? It's arguably one of the best novels, is arguably the best science fiction novel of all time, right? And part of me says, am I getting caught up in the success of Frank Herbert's Dune? The fact that it is a wonderful novel that I've enjoyed reading more than once over the years, followed up by the sequels as well. But am I getting caught up in the hype of the novel? And am I doing it justice? Because that's honestly how good I think Gateway is. But I've considered all kinds of things, right, when it comes to the weighted options, input that are used for these rankings. And Gateway has stood the test of time. I think the characters are complex and wonderful characters, as they are in June. It's a wonderfully written novel. Both of them are really wonderfully written novel. And all the criteria I use is pretty much on par, except for one of them, which is, would I recommend this novel over June to a new sci-fi reader? And I've got to say no, I wouldn't, because I've had two people reach out to me, friends and family reach out to me and say, what would you recommend, Pete, as a first good read? And I got talking to them saying, hey, what do you like, what don't you like? Have you read any fantasy? Do you like science? Do you like alien first contact type novels and all of that? And both of those recommendations came down to, yeah, I'd recommend June as a really good first entry into science fiction, right? And really, honestly, that is the only reason at the moment that Frank Herbert's June sits above Gateway, because I think it has a broader appeal to the general public. But for me, I think I enjoyed Gateway more. But I think generally speaking, June remains on top. It's a difficult one. I'm not even convinced, right? I'm still not convinced. But look, with time, what I think I'll do is we'll come back and revisit this board and we'll talk about it a little bit more. And maybe we will shuffle things around once some of these novels have sort of settled in back into their memory banks, right? And we can look at them a little bit more subjectively. And we might find that we move things up and down. And I might find that I'm completely fine with where Gateway's landed up, or I may turn around and say, you know what, I actually think that is a better novel for me, right? But hey, very difficult. I don't make it easy on myself in this channel. They're all wonderful novels. I say this all the time. They're all wonderful novels. I say I would love to hear your feedback on this one. If you've read June and Gateway, whether or not you're as conflicted as I am in this novel, or do you see it's clear cut? Really, really interested in your thoughts on that one. This has been an interesting one for me, because the other books on this list that I would consider them next to would be things like Ringworld. Rendezvous with Rama is not quite there, but Gateway I thought was just a much, much better written novel than Ringworld, right? But yeah, this has been Peter. This has been the Sci-Fi Shed Ladder. It never gets easy. And I thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time in the shed.